Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be discussing my review of the book Greater Than the Sum by Christopher L. Bennett. This book was released in August of 2008. It was right smack dab in the middle of several major Borg books that were happening. You had some books that happened before this, like Resistance, Death and Winter. You had the Homecoming duology for Voyager. You also had the big climactic novel Before Dishonor, which I intend to read soon. However, it is also kind of a prelude to the big events of the Destiny trilogy, which was billed as the beginning and the end of the Borg. And so what makes the Destiny trilogy big is that they go all out on the Borg, and what makes the previous books big is that they really set it up well. This is kind of one of the setup books, but it's the final of the setup books, and I think it does a very good job while still being a fun standalone story. You can read this book by itself, and you're going to have a blast with it, I think, because I think this is a really excellent novel. Interestingly, it isn't actually that big of a novel in scope. It really, the Borg threat really is small and the Borg is cut off from the collective, at least the Borg that we're dealing with. And it's not a traditional cube or a traditional sphere that they're dealing with. It's a new, unique type of Borg ship that I find really fascinating. However, the stakes are still really high, and our crew wrestles with many deep questions regarding mortality, regarding morality, regarding procreation and marriage and the role of family in society. A really excellent dive into all of those topics, and I'll highlight a few of them here. It also does a good job of telling a standalone Borg story that is lots of fun, that includes many references to things. If you're a big Next Generation fan, this is a true... Whereas Destiny is, if you like all Star Trek, you're going to love it. This is if you like the Next Generation, because there's lots of Next Generation cues in this book. And it also does a ton of foreshadowing of Destiny. I would say Destiny is the big Borg book. This is the small one. The themes of this book also are incredibly present in Destiny, but they happen on a much faster pace and on a much smaller scale, and you don't have as much time to think about them. But yet still, this is an excellent book, and I'm really glad. I know a lot of people were mad that we got so many Borg books in a row, yet I find the Borg as the best villains for Star Trek, so I really like when we get lots of Borg stories. We need Species A472 stories. Those are the stories we really need. We need a trilogy or a 5-book series where they invade and they have to work with the Borg. That would be a cool series. Hit me up, Paramount and CBS and Simon & Schuster. Anyway, but this, if you want to go into Destiny, this is an excellent pre-Destiny book to read. It will get you excited for Destiny, and also it's just a good standalone book that sets the stage for you. You go into Destiny, and you're all set. What this book does have its best is its themes and its character moments. The character moments here are really good. The bulk of the book is focused on Jean-Luc Picard and his struggles, and then you also have a new character named Teresa Chen and her struggles, and then some of the other TNG characters have spotlights, but it's really a Picard novel with Teresa Chen as the main second in the book. What makes this theme so good is the theme around Picard is the idea of fatherhood. He is terrified of the future, not because he's afraid he will die, not because he's afraid other people like Beverly, his new wife at this point, will die. He's worried that what will happen if he has a son and he can't be a good father. He's worried about not being there for his a potential son. He's worried about not being there to extend the line and abandoning Beverly to a life by herself. But he's also worried about him failing. He's more worried about his failure than he is about his death, which is really interesting. The whole Picard subplot is also around the idea of procreation in general. Rarely do we actually get procreation stories in Star Trek. Sometimes characters will have intimate relations and will have children. I'm talking Kiko and O'Brien and DS9. You also have B'Elanna and Tom in Voyager. Those are the exceptions. But they really don't generally focus on extending the future, preparing for the next generation, as it were. Typically, these are people who are dedicated to their jobs, they're dedicated to the ideals of Starfleet, and they are dedicated to doing that work. And family typically is something that gets in the way of that work. And so what makes this book so good is it shows, hey, maybe these people in the Federation, and particularly in Starfleet, need to rethink how they structure their lives, need to pay more time for being there. This book has incredible arguments for why fathers need to be there for their sons, and why mothers need to be there for their children as well. And there's entire discussions about why it's important to be with your family and not just working. It talks about why it's important to have a spouse, why it's important for couples to have children and make families. It's not just about extending the family line, it's also about purpose. It's also about the future and having something to live for in society. Beyond just the ideals that you believe. And so it's really interesting discussions. And of course, there are counter-arguments present by some of the characters in the book, but really some compelling arguments that I really liked seeing in the book. So it was refreshing to see that, because you don't see that in sci-fi generally, and we also don't see that too much in Star Trek. I think the literature is a little bit better at this, but even sometimes there are huge plot lines where just like all the characters are working and there's no room for family, and it's kind of frustrating at times, but it's done really well here. The book introduces the character of Teresa Chen. If you've read any of the later Star Trek post-Nemesis books that happen after this, you will be well aware of Teresa Chen. She is around for the long haul. But her character is first introduced here, and boy, is she annoying. She is built to be a brash, arrogant, nonconformist, annoying brat that nobody likes, really. And they just are... They aren't forced to take her on board the ship, but they kind of, by necessity, it's going to happen, and they basically are like, I guess the story needs it. So she is forced onto the ship, and nobody likes her. Nobody likes working with her. Picard kind of finds her funny, kind of finds her nonconformist style humorous and a change of pace, which the audience does as well. I really like how, even though I'm supposed to find her annoying, and I did, throughout the novel I found her annoying, I also find her hilarious. She has some great lines in this book. She just delivers some humor that you really don't see, like, without Data in the books. Data is someone who doesn't understand social norms, and so he would provide humor that way. But without him, there's no one to do that. Here, Teresa understands the social norms. She just doesn't care. Because she's just funny. And so I really enjoyed seeing her through this, and in fact, by the end of the book, I was as interested in her as I was in Picard, which was impressive considering Picard's like a TV character. I can perfectly imagine him, and I've seen so much with Picard, and Teresa's a fresh new character, original to the books, and yet I still enjoyed her just as much. So I think that Christopher Bennett did a really good job introducing her, and she had some really interesting points in her story about morality, about lying. Also, there's interesting points in her story about doing the right thing when necessary. I really liked all of that. The book also balances action with discovery. Sometimes some of the books are truly action heavy or plot heavy, I guess you could say. I'm talking like your The Fall series, my favorite series, the Prey series. It's much more action-based than it is discovery-based. Even though I love those series, and those are some of my favorites, I still recognize that Star Trek still has an element of discovery and new worlds to it, and this book really does that with the creatures involved, the no angels involved. But it also has plenty of action. Of course, I said this is a Borg book. And one of the problems that I had with Destiny is it was promised as the big Destiny trilogy. It's the beginning and end of the Borg. It's the be-all, end-all Borg story. And it kind of is, but it's mostly the Borg stuff happens off screen. It's about our characters reacting to the Borg stuff. We don't see many battles present with the Borg. You don't see them going on Borg cubes and duking it out like you'd expect. You get that type of thing here. and you get all the setup for Destiny, which I really like the way this balances the discovery and the big action plots. And not to worry, if you like some of the other characters from the other Star Trek elements of Next Generation, Dr. Crusher has a pretty substantial amount of time here. Most of her story is dealt with Picard and his stuff because they're married now, and so there's the husband and wife dynamic, but she still has some cool scenes. Geordi LaForge has some cool scenes, and Worf has like one good scene, and then several times he's sprinkled throughout the book. So Next Generation elements are aplenty. It's not just the Teresa, Chen, and Picard story, even though they're definitely the 1 and 2 main characters in it. But it uses the other characters pretty well as well. And I have to admit, I was not a big fan of Christopher Bennett's The Captain's Oath. I thought that it was a decent book, pretty good, but there was so much I didn't like about it. I didn't like the way the story was jumping all over the place. I didn't like the convoluted nature of it. He had too much discovery in that book. I couldn't keep up with all of it. Also, there was a lot of political preaching in that book that just felt forced, whereas here it doesn't feel forced. It feels very organic, very nice to read. So, and even when I disagree with him, because he makes a few points in here that I disagree with, it doesn't feel as forced in this book. So I liked it better in that aspect. So I think this is an excellent, amazing book. With just a tiny few issues, but overall, very exciting. If you've watched the Next Generation TV show, you will be rewarded because there are some deep cuts included from the TV show as well. And if you haven't, it won't go over your head. They explain it perfectly. So, I would give Star Trek Next Generation Greater Than the Sum a 9 out of 10. An excellent standalone novel. Makes me want to read more Star Trek. So if you've read this book, let me know your comments down below. Let me know, did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you interested in reading it? If you've read the other books like Destiny or Before the Sun or any of the others, let me know your thoughts on the Borg use in this book, and any thoughts on Star Trek. I love discussing Star Trek books, and hopefully more people will get involved as well. So, until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.